The last 23 years, I've been living away from home, be it in Bahrain or now in Hong Kong. Navigating around the ways of working in a different culture has been a great learning experience. How you greet each other when you meet, how do you hand over visiting cards, what is okay to ask, how is trust built, how are decisions made around here. Each of these places has its own nuances, and you have to learn your version of the tango to find out how things work. Welcome back to my Thursday video series where I share examples for you to use at work to make your messaging sticky. I read about this incident in a Harvard Business Review article. Elizabeth Altman is an associate professor of management at the Manning School of Business at the University of Massachusetts, Oval. She talks about the year she spent at a Sony camcorder factory in rural Japan, where she faced both estrangement and sexism. It was, she says, by far the hardest thing I've ever done. The foreign culture, particularly its emphasis on groups over individuals, was both a shock and a challenge to a young American woman. It wasn't just that she felt lonely in an alien world. She had to face the daunting prospect of carving out a place for herself as the only woman engineer in a plant and nation where women at that time usually served as low-level assistants and clerks, and they were known as office ladies. Another American woman who had come to Japan under similar circumstances had warned Altman that the only way to win the men's respect was to avoid being allied with the office ladies. But on a very first morning, when the bell rang for a coffee break, the men headed in one direction and the women in another. And the women saved her a place at their table while the men ignored her. Now, instinct told Altman that she needed to ignore that warning that her friend gave her rather than insult the women by rebuffing their invitation. Over the next few days, so she continued to join the women during the breaks, and that choice gave her a comfortable haven from which to observe the unfamiliar office culture. But it didn't take her long to notice that some of the men actually spent their breaks at their desk reading magazines, and decided, I could do the same on occasion. And finally, after paying close attention to the conversations around her, she learned that several of the men were interested in mountain biking. Because she herself wanted to buy a mountain bike, she approached them for advice. Thus, over a period of time, she established herself as something of a free agent, sometimes sitting with the women, other times engaging with the men, and sometimes sitting at her desk reading magazines. As it happened, one of the women who sat with her on the very first day, the department secretary, she was married to one of the engineers. So the secretary took it upon herself to include Altman in social gatherings, a turn of events that probably wouldn't have happened if Altman had alienated her female co-workers on that very first day. Had I just gone trying to break in with the men and not had her as my ally, it would have never happened, she says. Looking back, Altman believes that that experience greatly helped her gain a clear sense of her personal strengths, her capabilities, and prepared her for other difficult situations. Her tenure in Japan taught her to observe closely and to avoid jumping to conclusions based on cultural assumptions. Invaluable skills which held her in place at her next position at Motorola, where she led efforts to smooth alliances with other corporate cultures, including those of Motorola's different regional operations. Altman says, I would have been able to do the Motorola job if I hadn't lived in a foreign country and experienced that dissonance of cultures. Even if you're sitting in the same room, ostensibly agreeing, unless you understand that frame of reference, you're probably missing a bunch of what's going on. What a powerful example for examining one's values, questioning our assumptions, and honing our judgment while being true to ourselves. Now, in what context would you share this example? For instance, you could say that in a global and diverse business environment, managers must show perceptiveness and adaptability in interacting with individuals sensitively, and share an example like this to illustrate. Where else would you use this example? Do write in and let me know.